Yo, what is up, guys? Thanks for tuning into the Lake Show Digest today. As always, I'm your host, Mateo. And you've no doubt heard by now the Lakers put up a dog shit effort from top to bottom in a game that might have defined their season. The Lakers embarrassed themselves, the organization, and every fan that roots for them, really. They lost by 30 and were down by 30 the entire time against a really hyped up Phoenix Suns team that I still think we would have gotten past in five, maybe six games if we had the health of last year's AD and last year's LeBron. But what can we do now? The Lakers face elimination in the first fucking round, heading into game six at Staples Center. Heading into this game, people, myself included, were talking themselves into seeing a legendary LeBron performance, but we didn't get that. Frank Vogel gambled with the rotations a bit. He started Markieff Morris at the four, and it ended up getting the Phoenix Suns going because the defensive tandem of Morris and Drummond wasn't working, as you probably expected it not to work. Dennis Schroder was also one of the big lowlights. He shot 0 for 9 when we needed him more than ever that night. And the shooters just played scared. First quarter, we got out to a short run. It was like 10-5, and it looked like we were going to put up a good fight. But we saw multiple guys pass shots up. Dennis, we saw KCP pass shots up. The guys, if they aren't going to shoot, it's just going to make the Suns crowd the paint even more. It's going to mess up the whole game plan. But it isn't over yet, technically, though it kind of feels like it. We can save our season on Thursday, maybe get AD back. There's some reports that maybe he may be coming back. They are a little bit suspect, but we'll see what happens. It's all kind of bad right now, guys. But we got Alex today with us. He's been on the show before, and he's the chief realtor of Dennis Schroder Island. So, bro, I want to hear your
I
thoughts
know
on
that's
the
right.
game and just how's business going on Dennis Schroder Island.
Um, man, we got a lot of late cancellations.
Yeah.
After game, after games 3 and 4, it looked like we were gonna be back up and running. I was looking at talent, might get the Backstreet Boys in there for a couple shows. Um,
Yep.
yeah, and then
I hope you got
Dennis,
some cancellation fees or something, man.
it's looking bad, bro. I might have to move back to Oklahoma, buy a farm or something.
Dennis Schroder Farm. Dennis Schroder Farming.
Yeah. Um,
But man, let me get your
I
thoughts on.
didn't watch. I didn't watch most of that game. I looked in, and the reason I didn't watch most of that game is I expected it to go how it went.
Mhm.
I checked in, and the first half we were down by I think 14. It was still relatively close, and I think the first play I saw, LeBron drove to the basket and threw a pass to where he thought Caruso would be, and
Mhm.
Caruso dived, and the
He
pass,
cut he cut the other
hit.
way.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. The pass like hit the Phoenix Suns right in the bench, and I just saw like Bron slump his shoulders, and I was like, okay, I've seen this movie before. You know,
Yeah, we have.
it's been when your team quits like that, you have to sort of start getting into the mechanics of why they quit, because this is not something you expect from world champions and all-time great players. But this season has just been an emotional fucking roller coaster, and those guys feel it. I think they've always believed that if they're healthy, they can compete and maybe beat anybody, and we they weren't healthy for long enough. Not long enough for them to ever play their best basketball. Probably if the season ends after in six well if this series ends in 6 games, we might look back at this season and say um, game 3 of this playoff series might have been the best game that we played together as a team.
I That's no question. Absolutely. I mean, just having that playoff crowd back in the building because they didn't get a playoff crowd during their whole championship run. That's what made that one game so fucking special, man.
Yeah, and it looked for a second like, I mean, just for that one shining game, like everything worked. You know, at
We had the
first,
momentum, man.
yeah, like Mark Gasol was our starter going into the season, and he was, and then we went and got Andre Drummond, and there were questions. Everyone like Andre Drummond is a clear and obvious talent upgrade, over Marc Gasol, over Damian Jones, who was at the time a guy that was finishing up his second 10-day with the Lakers, over even Montrezl Harrell, and but he hasn't played winning basketball in several years, and he was great. He was like 15 and 12, and he was flying around, changing shots and knocking people over on defense. It just it looked like everything was coming together, and then AD goes down in Game 4, and I think the collective air went out of our sails.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Looking when I was trying to preview Game 5, I was thinking, Game 4 we kind of got blindsided by that AD injury. I mean, I guess at this point we kind of expect him to, he's gone down a lot of times, but he gets back up most of the time. Which I don't label him as a soft player. If a guy gets hurt, a guy gets hurt, man. Um, but he's played through a ton of injuries, and he did it last year, and we won a freaking title. A lot of people seem to forget that.
Mm-hmm.
But we obviously can't predict the future. How healthy is he going to be in the future? Um, I mean, these are real questions we've got to ask ourselves. I do not in any way think we should trade him. I think this is still going to be a successful pairing between LeBron and AD. But what's also really sad about this year, dude, is we don't know how many elite LeBron years we have left.
Right.
And we don't know if AD can be the guy on his own. So far in what we've seen when LeBron's been out, it's just been AD. We've just been okay, AD
Yeah.
is a guy that needs people to set him up. And I mean, that's fine. Shaq was kind of like that too. I mean, Shaq was kind of dominant, but a lot of bigs need someone to set themselves up. The one exception is like Jokic, but he's a special player in terms of his facilitation. Um,
Absolutely.
but if our season ends in Game 6, man, then that's going to be my big takeaway from it. We just squandered a really talented team that we have, and I mean a lot of it was just due to injuries. Because if the Lakers get injured last year, if we get this version of LeBron, this version of AD last year, we probably only make it out of the first round. Maybe we beat the Blazers, but
Mm-hmm.
and maybe we beat the Rockets too. But the Nuggets probably would have taken us out in the Western Conference Finals. Um, I want to hear a little bit more about Schroder though, because you're really big, and
Yeah, that's been my guy. And right now, the consensus among people on the internet who've been keeping up with Dennis, this is obviously his contract year, and he made a big gamble on himself. He's turned down um, two contract extensions. The first one was a short, I think, a 1-and-1, and the second one was reportedly a deal that would have paid him north of $20 million a season for 4 seasons. And I don't, I mean, I had an interesting sort of back and forth with Eric Pincus, who is a capologist. He put capologist right in his bio on Twitter now. Like that's a recent addition.
that's been a
Um,
long time coming because that
yeah,
man's been like top of the
he's
cap game.
yeah he like basically everything I know about the collective bargaining agreement and the salary cap and player movement in the NBA. I learned from him,
Mhm.
and he was talking about Eric Pinkett. Well, he was talking about Dennis Schroder the other day, and I did not leave that conversation feeling good about Dennis returning to our team next year. If I had to put a percentage on it, I would say right now 60-40 against. Maybe not that high, maybe 55, um, maybe 55-45. And
And go
just
ahead.
because Eric is a cap guy, right? But he's been around the city and around that team for a long time, so he knows some folks. If he has to get some sourced reporting, which is not the first thing that he does, but he could still do that. And he made a statement where I asked him about the Lakers' potential avenues to replace Dennis, and the most attractive one would be to sign and trade him to a team that has cap space. like just sign and trade him for a pick so you can generate a trade exception the way Boston did with Gordon Hayward before this season.
Mhm.
Boston was able. Hayward had made up his mind to go to Charlotte, and because they already had cap space, there would be no need for sign and trade. And Danny Ainge wanted to try to keep um, his window open and get another another rotation player on that team. So he talked uh, Mitch Kupchak, a guy that I still have a lot of respect for, into doing a sign and trade where they just gave up a couple future second round picks. And the way that the sign and trade works is the player signs for whatever dollar amount with the old team, the team that they would be leaving, and then they're traded to the team that has cap space, but you generate what's called a TPE or a trade player exception, and that trade exception is worth the the amount of the first year dollar amount of
Mm.
that player's new contract. So Boston ended up with a trade exception worth $28.7 million. It was the largest trade exception in league history. And my thinking was that the Lakers could potentially do something similar with Dennis. And Eric's response was, "Well, why would they? Why would the Knicks do that? Most free agents just leave." That's true for most free agents, but most free agents don't leave contending teams. And when they do, they often leave via the sign and trade. When KD left Golden State to go to Brooklyn, that was also a sign and trade, but the Warriors got D'Angelo Russell back in return.
Right.
That's not something I expect the Lakers to pursue as far as getting a player back for Dennis, because when you pay the luxury tax the previous season, or even if you didn't pay the luxury tax, but you do a sign and trade for a player, and that player's incoming salary takes you over the tax line, you become hard capped. It triggers a hard cap, for which the Lakers had one this season, and it was very difficult to add players to our roster like around the edges. The core was pretty set up, but we had to. There was some stuff going on where we had to, when we were trying to add Ben McLemore and Andre Drummond, we had to wait until their veterans minimums contracts would be prorated down to a small enough amount that we could fit them into our limited cap space. You don't want to be hard capped consecutive seasons, and particularly not with this team coming up, because the Lakers have a lot of free agents. A lot of important players are going to be without contracts at the end of this season. THT is the very first that comes to mind.
Is he unrestricted?
He is restricted. However,
Teams know
even
about him.
yeah, he is. So THT is restricted, which means even if he signs an offer sheet with another team, the Lakers can match that offer sheet, and retain him. Like there's he wouldn't have a choice.
Hmm.
But if the Lakers make a move that causes them to be hard capped again, basically the restrictions fall out the window. Like we would be able to sign him within the cap space that we had, but we could not exceed the hard cap. You cannot exceed the hard cap by any means, even if you own a player's rights to the in restricted free agency. The hard cap is set in stone.
To summarize, if we did a sign and trade with Dennis, that's going to trigger a hard cap, and then that's going to hinder our flexibility with retaining a guy like THT. Am I hearing that right?
So if we did a sign and trade with Dennis and we acquired a player in return, because we are a
Not a trade
luxury
exception.
tax playing team, the language in the CBA is very specific. You are allowed to do a sign and trade, um, and for picks, or just sign and trade a player to a team that has cap space and generate a trade exception without triggering a hard cap. But if you were to sign and trade a player and acquire another player, that would generate the hard cap. So what I said back to Eric after he asked why would the Lakers, or why would Dennis agree to a sign and trade, because all three parties have to be involved. The Lakers would have to want to do this. Dennis would, and his agent would have to want to do this, and the team that Dennis ends up on would have to want to do this. And I was like, well, the Dennis's max contract for a player with his years of service is higher with the Lakers because we have his bird rights.
Right.
The max for a bird free agent is higher than that of for a non-bird free agent. Regardless of how much cap space the team is going to have, and the Knicks are going to be like in the 70s, in the like 70 plus million as far as spending power this offseason. But
For
they
just
could not pay, yeah, they could not pay Dennis the same amount per year that the Lakers potentially could, but just because the Lakers have his bird rights, he would be considered a bird free agent for the Lakers.
right.
And when I said this to Eric, he said back, I've from what I understand, there is no scenario where the Lakers are going to pay Dennis Schroder the max.
After
Now
this,
this yeah now this was before this playoff series even started. I heard him say that and my antennas went up like, oh wow, it sounds like Dennis could have just had the playoff series of his life, and averaged 25 and 10 and led us to the second round. And like that wasn't something that was likely, but it was still possible. The series had not started yet. And Eric came out and said, from what I understand, there's no scenario where Dennis Schroeder gets a max. So
Mhm.
that leads me to believe that he's heard something. He's heard something from someone official, and that negotiations are at a point of contention between the Lakers and Dennis. And that's, I mean, if you want Dennis back on our team next year, that's spooky.
Yeah.
Um,
Wonder what they would offer him if they did decide to retain him. Because I mean, we have to weigh the good with the bad. Dennis had some good moments this year, especially when LeBron went out, and I thought he improved as a player. Um, this egg that he laid in Game 5.
hmm
I mean, we I heard from just a person on Twitter saying that he might have hurt his leg in Game 3. I think his ankle. I don't know how official that is, but that's something we got to keep in mind. And also, he said he didn't get COVID. We were talking about this before we started recording, but
hmm
I feel like it maybe because he was the only unvaccinated guy on the team, he just didn't want to, I don't know, tell the truth about that. Um, I mean, Dennis had some good moments for us, man. He made our perimeter defense pretty fucking strong. He fit right in with our scheme. This has just been a bad year in terms of injuries, man. I think we alluded to at the beginning of the pod. If LeBron and AD have their current health now, we aren't making that run last year. Everything starts and ends with LeBron and AD. But that's the risky thing because if an injury prone guy like AD goes out, the whole thing kind of crumbles. There's been an argument about how deep are we really if, one guy goes out and then we can't put up a fight like we saw yesterday. I still think we're a deep team, but it's conditional on if LeBron and AD are there and if they're playing well.
that
The
is exactly right.
You need both
We
those, and then the superpowers activate, and then we become that team that looks so fucking strong in the beginning of the year, and that was even with a hobbled AD.
yeah, we are maybe the deepest team in the league, and the only team that's even close that I would consider even close are the Nets. Um,
But they're
however,
top heavy too.
however, it you can't lose Braun or AD. You know, if it was another guy, we've got so many pieces, man. Like I mean, KCP has been struggling this series, and then at least on offense, he's been really good on defense. And he gets hurt, and Ben McLemore comes in, and you know we go up big in the first half of the game where McLemore plays. Wes was playing well for a little while, We've got so many rotational players. We've got more than we can play. We've got guys that would play on other playoff teams that get DMPs on the Lakers, but it just can't be LeBron or AD going out.
Yeah, everything revolves around them, man. And that was the plan last year, and we won a championship, which is why I've given me personally, I've given people, Frank, the players, their ability to come back from injuries. In general, I've given the team a huge benefit of the doubt, and that's all pretty much over after Game 5, man. Because
It's
that it was coming into this, it was gonna be like Game 5 was going to be very indicative of what the Lakers are made of because their backs are completely against the wall. They don't have the momentum. They're used to playing without the guys this year. I mean, we we missed LeBron and AD for half the year. I thought they were going to put up a better effort than that, but it came down to the big over what's the word? Anyways, the big factor was just injuries. Man, if we aren't this banged up, we put up a much better fight. But we really just saw a lack of heart in Game 5 that I was kind of surprised. And I want to ask, you did say before that you weren't surprised by the fact that we lost so bad, but were you surprised with the lack of fight? Because I really was, man. I mean, half our roster is championship players.
that's right. Half our roster is championship players, and those those players, even if before they were championship players, they were guys who played hard. I'm thinking about Alex Caruso, Markieff Morris.
And Kuzma made some big
Yeah,
improvements this year. I mean,
yeah, those were guys that competed because they're competitors. It's uh, the way that they're wired. But this team is exhausted, I think, mentally.
you made a
And
good point when we were texting. I was just like, what the fuck, man? And you
yeah,
said something to the effect of this team is just mentally, emotionally, physically just exhausted.
yeah, I don't. We saw it kind of um, when AD went out around Valentine's Day. We had that game where I don't remember who we played, but it was a game where on paper we were good enough to win, and we
The
lost
Nuggets.
pretty decisively.
We were playing the Nuggets on the game that he went down. He was driving by Jokic.
Mm. And I was like, me and you were texting after that game, and I was like, our leaders did not lead; they just felt sorry for themselves. And LeBron did
Last
in
two
his
games.
media availability. He said guys are just kind of fed up or with other guys, going down. And it wasn't when he said, I don't know if he used fed up, but what I took away from him for what he was saying was guys are just dejected, you know, like these guys that compete hard and are world champions, they're rotational players and they know how far they can go if LeBron and AD are healthy. But if one of LeBron or AD gets hurt or and can't play or can't play as well, like it shrinks their confidence. And you could see it in the first half of yesterday's game where, again, we were afraid to shoot the ball. Um, KCP, after having LeBron shouting into his ear, was turning down shots again. KCP is another interesting one. There's a as good a chance that he's not with us next year, even though he has a contract. There's as good a chance that he's not with us as anyone that's currently on our roster. But
I know. And I was thinking to myself, do I want KCP back? I know I said I'm going to stock you in the benefit of the doubt, but I still kind of give it to him because he's fucking hurt right now, and he's been
I,
really good.
so KCP, back to the contract side of things. Rob Palenka pulled the wool over our eyes with that KCP contract. Like
I haven't heard
whenever,
that expression before, by the way. Pulled the wool over our eyes.
oh man, like we thought that we were getting, you know, fair enough market value for KCP when we signed him. That deal was, I think,
You
like
talk about his
four.
most recent deal or his first deal with
Yeah,
us?
the one that he signed before the season.
Okay.
So KCP makes on average 13 million a year over the life of this deal, and it's a 4-year deal. It was recently discovered, and I think Eric did this personally. It's on the Basketball Insiders website that the final year of KCP's deal is non-guaranteed. It's not an option year. It's just the Lakers can decide to waive him by June 28th of 2022 and don't have to pay him a dime of that 4th year.
That's some NFL shit.
Yeah, like that is, and that's a recent discovery. Like it just went up, it just became public knowledge in like April or May. Like we were all thinking um, that this was just a straight across a 4-year deal for KCP. I don't know how he got KCP to sign a contract with zero guarantees for a 4th year. I mean, even an option year, if it's a player option, I mean, most players decline their player options and try to get, a long term deal in the last year. He like a deal with a year with no guarantees, no guaranteed money is just crazy. I don't understand how he was able
You
to
don't
pull.
see it in the NBA, man.
Yeah,
It's always guaranteed with NBA contracts.
especially a young guy in his prime like KCP. KCP will be like 31 going into that final year. And so next year is the when the season restarts this summer, it will technically be a contract year for KCP
Hmm.
because he has no guarantees on the final year. So his value as a not just as a player, his value as an expiring contract kind of increases to the point where I think we could do something interesting with him.
I mean, it's a tradable number, isn't it? Around like eight.
Well, it's I think it's like 13. I had this all pulled up the other day when I was just up in the middle of the night the way I am, and
Thinking about that Lakers cap, man,
yeah,
keep you up at night.
just just crunching the numbers like, you know, and I think KCP he's like 13 or 13.5. It's a very tradable number.
Yeah. So is Kuz. I mean, what do you think about Kuz? Would you? I'm open to trading him if it's the right deal. He's got another tradable contract too.
Right. I think before like if we're going to get into all these moves that the Lakers could make, the first thing we need to do is sort of get inside Rob Pelinka's head and determine what his goals are coming up for this coming season. Do we want to improve this team? I think, and keep the window open. I think. Um, a few weeks ago, back before the playoffs started, and everyone was sort of in the honeymoon phase with Andre Drummond. Um, Eric Pincus wrote an article about how the Lakers could potentially bring Drummond back, and that included a lot of nightmare scenarios for Lakers fans, where we basically nuke the team to get underneath the luxury tax and offer Drummond a similar contract to what we were able to sign Trez for.
No,
Uh,
thank you. I'm not nuking the team for Andre Drummond. Sorry,
absolutely, absolutely not.
get the
But
fuck out of here.
towards that thinking, I think Rob will be aggressive in replacing him, or at least he'll try to be. The Lakers have got some more picks coming up that we can trade this summer. With the Stepien rule, you're not allowed to trade your first round pick in consecutive years, and we owe first round picks to New Orleans for the AD deal. There might be another one in there squirreled away somewhere, probably from the fucking Steve Nash trade, which took forever. I wouldn't be surprised. That was like 9 years ago. I wouldn't be surprised if we're still paying off the Steve Nash trade.
That trade is just continuing to stick around for a decade. It's kind of impressive, man.
Yeah.
Um,
Ugh.
that Stepien rule, that feels like it was established because is it Ted Stepien? Is that his name? Maybe
Mm.
he was just trying to tank too much, and the league was like, "All right, you got to stop. We got to make a rule that you
Yeah.
keep trading away your fucking picks."
So like the the dominant teams of my childhood, the Bulls and the Spurs, I remember watching the drafts as a kid every year, and they would just sell their first round pick for cash. Like there
Or
were
they're
two or
using the
three.
team as a drug front. Jesus Christ, man!
like
Like using
I
like
think
a mat or some shit.
like I I don't know, man. Maybe NBA scouts weren't as good back then, or the talent pool wasn't as deep. But like the methodology was that you just couldn't get a contributing player that late in the draft. Like once you get out of the top 20, 20, 25, even 20 through 25 would have been, a guy that that's probably not going to make your team. But once you get out of that top 20, you're not getting a rotation player. So the Bulls would rather have just Jerry Reinsdorf and Jerry Krause, those guys. They sold the pick, and then whenever they needed to fill out the roster, there would always be, ring chasers, guys at the end of their career that wanted to, come play with Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen and for Phil Jackson and sign a veteran's minimum deal. So it's it's sort of been a revelation that the Lakers were able to do all this. Jordan Clarkson was a late first round pick. I think Caruso was an undrafted free agent. THT was in the fucking second round, and that guy, THT, is the priority in my mind for Rob Pelinka this offseason.
Caruso should be too. I think
Yeah.
we
Caruso,
we played our best when he's at the one and helping LeBron, elevate the team.
especially since Caruso, his value is very specific. He is a guy that raises the ceiling on your, not the floor. You're not going to ask him to lead the team in scoring
No
um,
sir.
on a nightly basis. So Caruso's market will be kind of like Dennis's. We need a tough point guard that's going to play hard every night. I think the Bulls are probably going to sniff around Caruso. The Knicks probably going to sniff around. Um,
But there was a
right now,
headline recently saying that they might have the advantage just because Caruso likes playing with LeBron. I mean,
mhm,
those two fit together like two peas in a pod.
yeah,
So that gives me confidence.
yeah, like Caruso is sort of like LeBron's new Matthew Dellavedova. Like, you remember the Cavaliers won the championship, and then Dellavedova went and got paid. He signed, I think, with Milwaukee and got a deal worth around $8 million a year.
Was Delly on the 16 team? Because I remember him having a lot of shine in that 15 run where everyone
Right.
got hurt for the Cavs.
So what happened was the Cavs tried to load up that offseason. They signed Derrick Rose and Dwayne Wade, and none of that shit worked. And they ended up trading for Dellavedova back.
Hmm.
Uh,
Remember that? Yeah.
so I I think there's a good chance that we get Caruso back. I think this team will look one or two ways: largely the same, or something crazy is going to happen. Something that's just going to blow all of our socks off.
I'm with you on that. Yeah. I
Like,
mean, we are more prone for a big trade now more than ever if we lose in the first round. And it's
right.
trending that way, bro.
And
Um,
it's like I was saying, we've got a few more bullets to fire since we can trade um, our first round picks starting with 2027, which the Lakers have found a loophole in the Stepien rule. And like we've been drafting players in the first round and just trading them on draft night rather than trading the actual rights to the pick.
yep. That's a nice little workaround, yeah.
um, that's
They're gonna make
something
a Palinka rule pretty soon. Gotta watch out.
I mean, we own our first round pick again this year, and we'll be drafting between 20 and 25 more than likely.
Mhm.
I don't I
I
don't
want
know.
I want to ask real quick, who are the guys that you definitely want to come back next year? Like who are your definitely need to come back guys?
THT is first, Caruso is second. As far as,
Takes
I
a bit
mean,
of time to think after that, doesn't it? Because those
I
are two
mean,
of my guaranteed guys.
yeah, I mean, Kuzma has a contract, and I don't. I mean, we're not going to trade him for to get to for some financial relief. This team's going to be expensive next year. The Lakers have a lot of big money investors. It's not Jeannie Buss reaching in her purse. It's if you look around the league, the Warriors have been a team that led the league in payroll for like 3 years in a row, and they still lead the league in payroll. They pay more for their team than we do, and they miss the playoffs entirely. We can afford a big luxury tax bill to keep this window open. Um, so this team's going to be expensive. I think Caruso will be back around 10 to 12 million a year. I think THT will be back at 9.5 million a year. The reason that's so specific is because of the arenas provision, which is it's kind of complex to talk about. I mean, if you want, I can explain it if you want, but basically, no team is going to be able to offer THT a contract where the first year is more than that of the non-tax mid-level exception. It's a rule that was worked in because Gilbert Arenas was a player that was drafted in the second round, turned out to be an all-star and an
He got a
all-NBA
ton of
level
money.
player, and he was drafted. Oh God, who where was Arenas at before he went to Washington and made his career? I just spaced out.
I'm forgetting too because I always remember him as a Wizard.
Yeah, absolutely. Those were his best years when he was, the player that he became. But basically, second round picks don't go to restricted free agency because all the second year contracts for second year picks are not fully guaranteed.
Right.
So and they're shorter than contracts for first round picks. So Caruso and THT have finished their rookie contracts, but they were re-signed using like the early bird rule, something where um, you can get another 1 to 2 years on those guys. So THT would be a candidate for the arenas provision, just so the Lakers, as a cap team, would be able to re-sign him. Would have, even though they don't have any room under the salary cap or even perhaps the luxury tax. And the
Mhm.
reason that number is so specific is because every team has access to a mid-level exception. It's some lawyer speaky shit in there for that arenas provision. It's like they give percentages and all that, but the Lakers,
I've tried reading the cap myself, and
yeah,
I,
it's a pain in the like you
it's like the
really.
U.S. tax code, dude. It is like
Oh yeah.
purposefully obtuse. It seems. So I mean, hats off to guys like you and guys like Eric that pour through that shit, man.
So once we get past THT and Caruso, Markieff Morris, I mean, the Lakers need backup power forwards, and Markieff is a guy that's tough, brings it every year.
A lot of guys on our team, I wouldn't mind seeing back. I still
Yeah,
think this team was talented, and we just got
yeah,
fucked by injuries. A a silver lining, if we have to look at any, of losing in the first round. I mean, we get a proper fucking off season, and I mean,
uh-huh.
I'd rather take a deep run in a championship while we still have LeBron on our team, but a proper fucking off season, that's going to be huge for us, bro. And that's why I'm still wouldn't be upset if we brought back a lot of the same guys. But as you're outlining, it'll be difficult because of cap reasons and because of
Right.
guys having their contracts run up and stuff. Um,
Markieff has signed 1 year deals in consecutive seasons. He wants to get paid. before, he wants one more bit large-ish deal. I don't know what his market is going to be. I mean, you would think that there's plenty of teams that could use shooting and toughness, but he wasn't
He's like
always
his
that.
last 50 though for us though.
Yeah.
I mean, holy
He
shit.
wasn't always that for us this season, and he's not going to get the sort of deal that his brother got. Um,
Because I
but
mean, another thing about this season is half the team was on a championship team last year, but it was bad for our continuity as it's been hammered home relentlessly. Um, Talked about this year. If we get that continuity, I feel a lot more continuity plus a proper off season to heal. I'd feel pretty good about the Lakers next year still, man. And
absolutely,
you add on the fact that they were embarrassed, so now they got a real chip on their shoulder, and they're not trying to manufacture one, like they were this year. Because shit, man, they're the champs, and champs get complacent sometimes. But they get
every
embarrassed, and they get slandered again, then that's another real chip on our shoulder. So that's three possible silver linings that I'm counting.
absolutely every championship team deals with a certain level of complacency. I mean, if you sat down and you watch the whole
Glitter
the
album.
document, yeah, the Last Dance documentary where you know they the last season that the Bulls three-peated, they lost to some like the Denver Nuggets by like 39 or something like that, and then Dennis Rodman decided that he needed to go on vacation or something crazy. Every team deals with that. Yeah, I mean, you try. It takes so much to reach the top and win an NBA title. After you do it once, you know that no one can ever take it from you, and it's just sort of like, Shaq used to be quoted, "You got to be greedy. You got to want to keep your boot on the league's neck so you can come back and do it year after year." And not every team is wired like that. And every player, I mean, these guys live great lives. And the desperation that it takes to win one championship is difficult to replicate from one year to the next.
Yep.
But this team, I think there's a good chance that it comes back largely into. I mean, if you want to look at a list of upcoming free agents, if anybody that's listening wants to do that on their own time, a lot of our guys that are going to be free agents, there's not really an upgrade at for their position. So the Lakers would probably be better suited bringing them back. You know,
I'm glad you
Montrez.
brought that up. Yeah, that's been one of my implications. I've kind of been leading in that direction too. Like, okay, if we lose these guys, yeah, they've underperformed on some level. Who are we getting that's an upgrade? So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah. So another a year where we get good rest. I mean, fuck, it sucks going out this early, but our guys, we've played more basketball games than any other team, over the past 8 to 10 months. We
Makes
had
me feel good that the
we
the previous bubble finalists and semifinalists are also got worked because of similar reasons that we did.
yeah yeah we had the shortest turnaround. The team with the second shortest turnaround, the Miami Heat, are
Swept.
already eliminated. They got swept.
Boston gentlemen's
you
sweep,
know,
and they lost Jalen Brown too.
yeah,
That's been more competitive if they had Jalen. Nuggets just got a big win, or up 3-2. But hey, they're a younger team, man. So I'm kind of not surprised they're
yeah.
sticking around. Um, Man, I want to keep going, but I think we got to wrap it up right now. Do you have a quick prediction for Game 6, man? What are you feeling?
I think AD is gonna try to go. I think he's gonna be limited, and um, if we can get him out there, maybe the sight will be enough. This just him playing will be enough that we can win a close game. But
Hmm.
in Game 5, we looked like a team that was ready for the offseason.
It really felt like it. I'm like, so wait, this wasn't the last game of the series? Is it? They sure fucking played like it, man. Gave me 2008 Celtics Lakers vibes. Um,
Yeah.
I also think AD is going to end up playing because if he can go, he usually wills himself to it. So I expect to see AD in Game 6. Who knows, man? We'll have the home crowd at our back, and let's see what LeBron we get.
I
Yeah, man.
think I think there's a chance. I don't have I'm not going to make an official prediction, but I think AD is going to go, and I think there's a chance we can eke out a close game.
I think so too. Let's see. Let's see if we get that urgency, man. I mean, right now I'm still kind of favoring the Suns just because that was so bad. Another plus
Yeah.
though of losing Game 5 so badly, I don't think they're gonna put that shit of an effort through 2 straight games. I think we are better than that. I hope they don't make me eat my words, but we'll see, man.
I mean, I think you're right. What was the game at the end of the season where we got blown out and Genie tweeted, um, now playing I Don't Care by Justin Bieber, like during the
I
game?
forgot about that. Uh,
Yeah.
I remember doing that. I wish I remembered the
Yeah,
game.
we've got a bunch of guys that are playing for money, that are playing for their next NBA contract, and the owner of the team is watching the games. And you don't want this to be the last memory, your last playoff memory.
Yeah. Um, Unfortunately, we got to wrap it up now, man. But I'm excited to have you back on soon. And if the off season does come soon, love to dig into that more because you're knowledgeable about the cap situations. Thanks for coming on today,
Yeah,
man.
no problem, bro. Anytime.
Yeah, man. Take it easy.